When thinking about the best British goal scorers of all time, a few players come to mind. Whether it's Wayne Rooney, England's all-time top scorer, fellow Premier League stars Harry Kane and Alan Shearer, even going back a few years, there's players like Dixie Dean, Jimmy Greaves or Kenny Dalglish. But what if I told you there was one man who stands top of the all-time British goal scorers list, with a goal tally of 550, that you've probably never heard of? Take a look at this tables of footballers with the best ever goals to game ratio, and we can see just one British player in the top 10. His name? Jimmy Mcgreary. I'm sure any Celtic fans and most Scottish people watching this video would recognise the name. But why is it that if you look south of the border, or just in any other country in the world, this man is pretty much completely unknown? Born as James Edward Mcgrory in 1904, and with his entire career taking place between the two world wars, it's fairly understandable why he's not a household name globally. But you'd assume that at least most British people would know his name. However, it almost feels like his entire career has been erased from history. Having been born in an area of Glasgow now known as Royston, Mcgrory's parents were both Irish Catholics who had left their home in Ulster to emigrate to Scotland. Mcgreary started his career as St Roch's Juniors, aged just 16, earning a massive £2 a week. While at St Roch's, he burst onto the scene, firing his team to a League and Cup double, where in the final of the Scottish Junior Cup he scored the equaliser as his team went on to win 2-1. This good form caught the attention of clubs all across Great Britain, with 3 teams being clear frontrunners for his signature. Scottish side 3rd Lanark, the oldest team in London Fulham, and none other than Celtic. Of course, once Mcgreary found out that Celtic wanted him, there was essentially only one club in this 3-horse race, and they played in green and white. The young star signed for Celtic in 1922, aged just 18, where he started earning the big bucks of £5 a week. Despite having finally made it to his dream club, Mcgreary hadn't escaped the struggle. He played just 3 games in his first season, making his debut in a 1-0 loss against 3rd Lanark in January 1923, scoring his first goal 2 weeks later in a 4-3 defeat to Kilmarnock, his only goal in his debut season. Due to a lack of game time, Celtic decided Mcgreary should be loaned out to Clydebank, which ended up being the only other club the forward would ever play for. This loan allowed Mcgreary to focus on his football and took the pressure of performing for a team the size of Celtic off of his shoulders. Mcgreary scored in his debut for Clydebank, and funnily enough, later in the season, he scored the winner against Celtic in a shock 2-1 win, meaning he'd scored as many goals against Celtic as he had for them. It wouldn't be too long until this changed though. With 16 goals in 33 games for a team that finished 20th, it's fair to say that Celtic were impressed by his performances and had planned around him for the 1924-1925 season. After returning to Celtic, he was made the main man following Joe Cassidy being released. It looks like everything was set up perfectly for the boyhood Celtic fan to make himself a star of the Celtic squad. But as everybody knows, football never goes to plan. He was unable to score in his first 3 appearances that season, and just as things were already at the hardest for young Jimmy Mcgreary, tragedy struck. His father was killed walking through a park in Glasgow after being accidentally hit by a rock thrown in his direction. On the Saturday following the incident, he attended his father's funeral, and somehow just hours later, Mcgreary played against Falkirk, scoring his first goal of the season. It seemed like this tragic incident brought his goal-scoring touch back, as he continued to score at an incredible rate. And then, disaster struck Mcgreary again. A knee injury in November meant he was out until at least the new year, and would miss a considerable portion of the season. On January 24th, 1925, he returned from injury in a first-round cup game against 3rd Lanark, the same team he'd made his Celtic debut against, where they'd lost 1-0. Having missed over 2 months of football, and Celtic having only won 4 of the last 15 games, things didn't look good for the man nicknamed the Human Torpedo. What did he do? Score a hat-trick and inspire Celtic to a run of 13 wins from the next 17 games, ending the season with a 4th place finish in the league. This run of good form also led them to the semi-finals of the Scottish Cup, where Celtic had come up against fierce rivals Rangers in the semi-final. Rangers were top of the league and had lost just 3 of the 35 games they played that season. Celtic were clearly the inferior team, and most people knew how the game was going to go. Most players would see this and accept defeat, but Mcgreary wasn't a normal player. He scored a brace and led underdog Celtic to an emphatic 5-0 win as the Hoops made it to the Scottish Cup final. In front of 75,000 fans in the home of Scottish football, Hampden Park, Celtic came up against Dundee FC, who'd finished 8th in the league. The Celts were clear favourites going into the game with a far superior squad and form, and went on to win the game 4-0, breezing past a poor Dundee side. Just joking, of course. Celtic were left shell-shocked as Dundee completely dominated the first half, leading to them opening the scoring in the 30th minute through David McLean. At half-time, Celtic had managed to hold on to being just a goal down, but it looked like their fantastic cup run was over, until you remembered who they had up front. Celtic came out from the break a completely different side, putting extreme pressure on the Dundee defence, with keeper Jock Britton making save after save. As each minute passed, another shot was saved or blocked, and Dundee had done enough to win the game. Or at least it looked that way until forward Patsy Gallaher danced past the Dundee defence and knocked the ball past the keeper elegantly, equalising the game in the 81st minute. But the game wasn't over. Celtic wanted to win it, and every second that went by it looked like they would be settling for a draw and a replay. But in the final moments of the game, Celtic won a free kick, with John McFarlane sending the ball towards goal into a sea of gigantic and hard-hitting defenders. But one man rose above the rest and threw himself across the box to head the ball into the back of the net. It was none other than 5'6" Jimmy Mcgreary. The goal ended up being the winner, and after what would have been one of the hardest moments of Mcgreary's life less than a year before, he ended the season as a new icon for the Scottish Giants, winning them silverware in his first full campaign at the club. It was said that Mcgreary was a shy figure and was even surprised himself when his header hit the back of the net, saying as he hit the ground following his header, he thought he'd heard thunder. That sound was the Celtic fans celebrating. After the game, Celtic fans lined the streets of Glasgow, waiting for the team bus to get a glimpse of the trophy. Mcgreary had written himself into Celtic history, with his cup final winner being just one of 30 goals he scored that season. But of course, his story didn't end there. We all know the football world moves quickly, and just a few months later, the new season had started. Celtic won the first game of the 25-26 season against Hibernian with an assertive 5-0 victory. It looked like Celtic was set for another great season, with their new star man up top, and the return of club legend Tommy McKinley, who'd scored 75 goals in 93 games in his previous stint at the club. Everything was going to plan. The Hoops then went on to lose 4 of their next 8 games, having their worst start to a season in 15 years. To rub salt into the wound for Mcgreary, this poor run of form started with a 2-0 loss to Clydebank, favourites for relegation, and the side that he'd played for just 2 seasons previously. It looked like Celtic was set for another disappointing league campaign after a 1-0 loss to rivals Rangers on the 17th of October, leaving the club well off the pace. If it was any other club with any other man up top, you'd think that Celtic's season would have fizzled out. But Mcgreary was special. The human torpedo went on to score 49 goals in the league and cup, firing Celtic to an incredible run of form, losing just one of their remaining 31 league fixtures. This won Celtic their first title in 5 years, as well as another cup final. Sadly, this time round Celtic lost 2-0 to St Mirren. The next season Mcgreary enjoyed his best year yet, scoring 34 league goals before the new year, during a season where the forward had scored 4 goals in one game twice, as well as twice scoring 5 goals in one game. The man was on a mission to win the double, but sadly it didn't work out, with Celtic failing to even come close to retaining their title, finishing 3rd. As harsh as this was on Mcgreary, it wasn't as harsh as him missing the cup final in the same year due to breaking 2 ribs, having fired the team to the final. Despite missing out on the title and playing in his second cup final, which Celtic went on to win, Mcgreary will still have looked back at his 26-27 campaign with pride, having scored a remarkable 59 goals, despite playing in a time before any official European competition. It's clear to see that Mcgreary was a very unlucky man when it came to football. He'd been relegated in his first full season in Scottish football, missed months and months of football through various injuries, scored 30 goals in his first season for Celtic, yet they came just 4th, and everything else I mentioned about his ridiculously unlucky 26-27 campaign. Now forget about all that, because his 27-28 season trumps all of it and more. Now before I delve into the 27-28 season, you may have noticed that I haven't mentioned his international record. That's because he wasn't called up to the national team until 1928. At this point, Mcgreary had scored nearly 150 professional goals and was by far the best striker in the Scottish League, but was never picked for any international games. That's because there's a man named Huey Gallaher scoring goals for fun in England. At this point, he was midway through his spell at Newcastle, where he would score an incredible 133 goals in 160 games. Gallaher was facing a 2-month suspension in February 1928, and Mcgreary was finally given his chance. But just like pretty much everything else in his career, things did not go to plan at first for Mcgreary. Scotland lost 1-0 to Ireland, which was seen as a disgrace for the Scottish national team. What made this worse was Mcgreary not scoring. He was made the scapegoat for this result, as Huey Gallaher had an exceptional record against the same opposition, scoring 11 times in the 4 games he played against Ireland. Following the result against Ireland, Mcgreary was not called up for the national team for the rest of the decade. This was just part of his ridiculously unlucky 1927-28 campaign. As I mentioned earlier, Mcgreary, having now won the league once and the Scottish Cup twice, was desperate to do the league and cup double and gave everything he could to the team, leading to a truly remarkable goals tally. Celtic had already received and rejected various bids for him, but then in August 1927, Arsenal submitted a £10,000 offer to Celtic, which they then accepted. At the time, this deal was a world record transfer and would have made the news globally. To make a pilgrimage with manager Willie Maley to the shrine at Lourdes, a sacred place for Roman Catholics. What Mcgreary didn't know was that at Euston Station in London was Arsenal manager Herbert Chapman, who Celtic had arranged a meeting with to help push the deal through. Mcgreary turned them down at once and continued his pilgrimage to Lourdes. On his way back he was again met by Arsenal manager Herbert Chapman, but once again McGrory would refuse to move to Arsenal, showing his loyalty to the team he'd supported his entire life, Celtic. Once McGrory had returned to Glasgow, his wage was instantly reduced from £9 a week to £8, with no warning or reason given. It's widely believed that this was done out of spite, as Celtic had lost out on £10,000. It's crazy to think that these days star players are given huge rewards by clubs if they choose to stay. But back in 1927, McGrory was quite literally punished for his loyalty to the club he'd already led to 3 trophies in 3 seasons, a feat the club hadn't accomplished for a decade before McGrory joined. Despite the hectic summer he faced, once the football season started up again, McGrory put his head down and got to work as if nothing had ever happened. He wanted to win it all, and so did what he did best: score goals. Not only did he score a frankly ridiculous number of goals, but he also broke numerous records. In the league, McGrory had his best season ever, scoring 47 goals in 36 games. If we include cup games to that tally, the man scored 62 goals in one season. 62. If you put that up against the best seasons of all time, he's placed in 5th, behind only Dixie Dean, Joseph Buchanan, Ferenc Dijk, and arguably the best player of all time, Lionel Messi. This tally of 62 is equal to Mo Salah's last 2 campaigns combined, in a time where there was no European competition, meaning McGrory missed out on a potential 13 games if he were to play in today's Champions League format. If you average out his goals to game ratio, he would have scored an astonishing 80 goals in one campaign if you were to add those extra games, which would have made his 1927-28 campaign the greatest ever European season. And let's not forget, assists weren't counted back then. So if we can take an educated guess, we can assume that McGrory's overall goal contribution tally, with his 62 goals playing a huge factor, would most likely be around 100 separate direct goal contributions. Only Messi in his best ever campaign, playing in 6 competitions, with the greatest ever team to support him, and far superior equipment, training regimes and technology to aid him, has managed to reach 100 goals and assists. McGrory likely did it at the height of 5'6" in the 1920s on muddy Scottish pitches, with defenders kicking him to bits every week. Moving back onto the official league campaign, despite scoring 47 goals, McGrory was only able to fire his team to a 2nd place finish in the league. Luckily though, McGrory had fired his team to another Scottish Cup final, which they also lost. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, both the league and the cup were lost to bitter rivals Rangers, just when you thought it couldn't get any worse. In the 1930-31 season, having missed out on both the league and the cup for 3 seasons in a row, and with McGrory having struggled with injuries in the year since his incredible season, he was able to fire Celtic to another Scottish Cup final, where they came up against Motherwell. Celtic then found themselves 2-0 down in the cup final, when with 8 minutes to go, McGrory scored a goal almost identical to the winner he'd scored in his first cup final 6 years previously. McGreary grabbed the ball and ran back to the halfway line, as they had just a few minutes to get another goal back. Celtic pushed for an equaliser which just wouldn't come until the last minute, when a cross was turned into his own goal by Alan Craig, the man marking Jimmy McGrory. In the replay, Jimmy McGrory scored twice, taking the cup back to Glasgow in a 4-2 win. After 3 years of hurt, Celtic had finally won a trophy. McGrory's form on the way to the final had at last earned him another international call-up, where he scored his first ever goal for Scotland against England at Hampden Park. This goal would earn him another 2 Scotland caps, where he'd score in both against Ireland and Wales to put his international tally up to 3 goals in 4 appearances. The year after, in 1932, he made his 4th national team appearance, scoring once again in a 4-0 win against Ireland, with 2 more goals coming at Hampden Park in 1933 to win Scotland a game 2-1 against England. After so many years of work, McGrory was finally Scotland's main man, and would continue to be for the years to come. Of course not, this is Jimmy McGrory we're talking about. He was given just 1 more appearance for Scotland, in which once again Scotland lost against Ireland, and Jimmy McGrory was made the scapegoat after not scoring, never appearing for the national team ever again. It's sad that a man with 550 professional goals would be allowed to score just 6 of them for Scotland. Since the 1925-26 season, where a 22-year-old McGreary had fired Celtic to glory, their league positions were far from ideal. In 1927 they finished 3rd, and for the next 3 years they finished runners-up, until the 1929-30 season, where they would finish their joint lowest since McGreary's arrival, in 4th place. In their cup-winning season of 30-31 they came 2nd, once again to Rangers, and the year after it would be a 3rd place finish. For the 3rd time since McGreary joined, 1932-33 would see Celtic in 4th. A third place finish in 1933-34 led Celtic to the 34-35 season, where after a poor start from Celtic, Rangers had found themselves 6 points clear with just 6 games to go. Rangers then won just 2 of their final 6 games, meaning the title was in Celtic's hands. All they had to do was win their games. In true 1930 Celtic fashion, they went on to lose 1-0 to Ayr United, who had conceded 112 goals that season. The win against Celtic kept them up and handed Rangers the title, with Celtic 9 years away from their last Premiership success. It was now feeling like the new season was now or never for the human torpedo and Celtic to win the title. If he wasn't to be holding the trophy in April 1936, it looked like an injury-ridden 32-year-old Mcgreary would retire with just 1 league title to his name. Everything was on Celtic winning this league, and starting brightly as they'd failed to do so for the last 3 campaigns, leaving them with too much to do to recover following the turn of the year. They lost the opener 3-1 to Aberdeen. But what followed was a remarkable run of form, where they failed to win just 4 of their next 25 league games, putting them level on points with Rangers going into the fixtures on the 1st of February. It's important to note that just a month before on New Year's Day, Celtic had lost 4-3 at home to Rangers, and so would have already been losing the mental battle. On the 1st of February, Rangers drew their game against Motherwell, but Celtic failed to capitalise, losing away to Hearts. At this point, Celtic were 1 point behind rivals Rangers, who beat them to the title the season before, had won 8 of the last 9 leagues, and were in significantly better form. Despite the gap being just a single point, it was essentially all hope lost for Celtic, who'd given everything up to that stage, but had dropped points in nearly half of their last 10 games, whilst Rangers had stayed unbeaten in those 10, winning 8 of them. Not only this, but Celtic had also been knocked out the Scottish Cup the week following their loss to Hearts, leaving them with back-to-back losses. At half-time in the next game, Celtic found themselves level with Kilmarnock, having struggled to create any chances. Making this worse, Rangers were midway through a 6-2 demolition of Dunfermline and had doubled their points lead at the top of the table. Fast forward a little less than 45 minutes and Jimmy Mcgreary had just scored Celtic's 4th in a 4-0 win. They were back in the title race. The Hoops won their final 11 games, the highlight being a 6-0 battering of Ayr United on the penultimate day, winning them the league and relegating Ayr United. The 36-37 season came round, and with Celtic the title holders, the pressure was on them to retain the league. Despite their form from August to December not being as good as the season before, they were most certainly still in the title race. But after a spell of just 2 wins from 7, it was clear that Celtic wouldn't be champions again. But the season wasn't over yet. Celtic had made it to their 8th cup final since Mcgreary joined the club. He wouldn't score, but he did play a key role in Celtic winning the final 2-1, finishing his final full season as a Celtic player the way he had started his first, with a 2-1 win in the Scottish Cup, a trophy he won 5 times as a player, more than any other competition. Mcgreary started the 1937-38 season, but injuries had started to take their toll on the striker. And on the 2nd of October 1937, Jimmy Mcgreary scored his final ever goal for Celtic, scoring the 3rd in a 3-1 win against Clyde, with his final ever game coming 2 weeks later against Queen's Park, where he was injured. But this time, the human torpedo wouldn't come back. Jimmy Mcgreary, the man with a British record 55 hat-tricks, a British record of 8 goals in 1 game, a British record at the time of 62 goals in 1 season, a record of the fastest hat-trick in British football at the time, Celtic top scorer in 13 straight seasons, and is still their highest scorer of all time. Scored a British record-breaking 550 career goals in just 547 games, with only 7 of them being played at international level. The records go on, and so does the legacy of Jimmy Mcgreary. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. It took an absolute age to make. Sharing this video would help so much as well, to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatnot, even to just your friends would genuinely mean so much. Most importantly, comment if you'd like me to do more of these and which team or player I should do. I did actually want to add a bit more about the sort of controversy as to why Mcgreary wasn't selected for the Scotland team more often, but I have so much to edit, I would maybe explode if I had anything more to do. So I'm going to be doing a TikTok series on it. Links to the TikToks will be in the description. Please check it out. Yeah, not only TikTok, but my links to literally everything will be in the description, so please check them out. And yeah, like I mentioned, comment, thank you for watching, and goodbye.